Okay, so this second video is just going to explain to you how respirometers work. As I said, outside of the specification, but classic application question, so it's always useful to see these things in advance. I will also go on at the end just to discuss different types of respiratory substrate. Again, that's actually mentioned in the textbook, so I'll give you a little bit of detail on that and how that can be linked in with using respirometers. Now, we can measure the rate of respiration using a piece of equipment called a respirometer. And you'll remember from year 12, obviously we did a lot of work on pieces of equipment like this, which basically use capillary tubes, and you're measuring volumes of gas or bubbles and how far they move and how long they take to move that. And we can do calculations to therefore work out rates of respiration. There's a couple of things I want to just go through with you about this equipment to help you to understand it, and then I'm going to go over an exam question, which by all means stop the video and see if you can have a go at it before you then listen to me explain the answer. But I will say, this is not on the specification. It does not say teach students about respirometers. Just in our experience, it's a really a common application question on an exam. Okay, so I think it's useful to be aware of how they work. So basically, we've got some little maggots here on a piece of gauze, obviously they need to be raised off this stuff, sodium hydroxide, because it's very corrosive. So that's why they're up there on that little sort of wire box. Equally can be done with seeds, and you get all, plant seeds, or you get lots of different types of respirometers. But so long as the living thing is not in contact with this alkali, this base down at the bottom, for obvious reasons. Basically, the sodium hydroxide removes carbon dioxide. So as this organism is respiring, the sodium hydroxide is absorbing the CO2 that it's making. You quite often see it as, instead of sodium hydroxide, you quite often see potassium hydroxide. It doesn't matter, they both have the same job. Okay, so as it's respiring, it's going to be taking in oxygen and it's going to be giving out carbon dioxide, but that carbon dioxide is going to be being absorbed by the sodium hydroxide. So overall, the pressure inside this sealed chamber, the gas pressure, will decrease because the maggots are taking up the oxygen gas, the sodium hydroxide is taking up the carbon dioxide, so the gas pressure has gone down. And what you then see is that, because obviously you've got a three-way tap here, so that enables you to reset the water bubble basically. So at the moment that's a closed system, so that the only way that gas inside this experimental tube can equilibrate itself or even itself out, because that's what gas will always try and do, wants to be equal, not a greater pressure one side than the other. The only way it can go is up along the capillary tube. Can't go out to the outside because the tap's closed. Okay, but you need to have it as a three-way tap because you need to be able to reset the water bubble. So anyway, so as the pressure inside here goes down, the water droplet will be drawn along here. And you can obviously measure how far it goes in a certain amount of time. You can also, if you know the bore of the capillary tube, you'll be able to calculate a volume. And so you can start to look at rates of respiration in something like millimetres cubed per gram of organism per hour, say. So here we have an exam question. As you can see, luckily they've used a respirometer which looks very much like the one I've just showed you, but as I said, they do come in varying shapes and sizes. You just got to look out for their key features. So the first question about this was the students closed the three-way tap, so that's obviously sealed it from the outside. After 30 minutes, the drop of coloured liquid has moved to the left, so it's gone that way. Explain why the drop has moved to the left. So obviously you now want to maybe pause this if you want to have a go at answering it. Otherwise I'm going to carry on. And it basically is exactly what I've just explained to you on the previous slide. Okay, so the oxygen is going to be taken up by the wood louse. So it's going to O2 used up. Okay, the potassium hydroxide is going to be absorbed by the potassium hydroxide. But the consequence of both of those things is that the pressure inside here will decrease, and therefore that change in pressure between the tube and the capillary tube will mean that the drop will move that way. Okay, so that was a 3-mark question, 3 marks. Okay, the other thing they could ask you, and this is the reason really why we're particularly talking about this, because as I said, although it's not specified, they do this sort of level of detail it was in year 12, understanding about, the use of capillary tubes and the kind of measurements that you'd have to take. So, this is a good opportunity to talk about that. So again, if you want to have a go yourself, please pause the video, but asking basically what measurements should the student take to calculate the rate of respiration using this equipment. Okay, so clearly, they're going to need to measure the distance the drop's moved. They're going to need to know the time it took for that drop to move, okay? They're also going to need to know the mass of the organism looking at, in this case, the woodlouse, because obviously, the more mass there is, the more respirations there are going to be. So to make it a fair test and comparable, obviously they need to control all those variables. So you need to know the mass of the woodlouse. But as I said, if they're looking at volume, which you generally are, if you want to calculate rate in millimetres cubed per gram per hour, say, then they'd need to know the bore of this tube here. Obviously, it's too small for me to draw, but the diameter of that tube, of that capillary tube, so that you can use pi r squared to work out the cross-sectional area, and that will be able to give you a volume. Sorry, I just jotted that there. So the bore will enable you to use pi r squared, which we did some work on in year 12. So ultimately, the final measurements that we'll be able to work out then to give us a rate would be the volume per gram of organism per hour. Okay, and in fairness, they may even say to you, here's the units, what measurements would they need to take? I'll just try to make it a little bit more difficult for us as we're trying to think and learn at the moment, to actually think what would they do without any prompting. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense on how you might use the respirometer. Now the other sort of application style thing that they could ask you, and in fairness, if you look in the textbook, they do talk about alternative respiratory substrates. So obviously we've learned all about the breakdown of glucose, carbohydrates basically. But of course, our body is capable of aerobically respiring both fats and if we're really, really desperate, protein. The principles of that are very similar. Obviously, you don't need to know any of the detail of that. And the big difference is basically in place of glycolysis, the fatty acids and proteins are broken down in different pathways, but following those lines. So ultimately, they all feed into Krebs. But anyway, I said you just need to be aware that those things can also be broken down aerobically. And you can just see as an example here, again, I suppose it could be an application question. They might give you various amounts of information. We can calculate something called the respiratory quotient. Again, don't worry too much about it, but it's just basically the ratio of carbon dioxide made to oxygens used. And obviously, when we think about aerobic respiration, you make 6 of carbohydrates, that is. You make 6 carbon dioxides, you use 6 oxygens, so the respiratory quotient is 1. So you can tell a lot by when you do these experiments with the respirometers, and you can actually start to work out volumes of gases. And again, that's getting a bit complicated for what we need. But you can start to work out what type of respiration is going on, be that anaerobic or aerobic, but also which type of substrate is being used. So you can see in this particular example, this is oleic acid, not that that really matters or you need to know that, you don't. But you can hopefully see here, this is not one-to-one. To fully aerobically break down that, and obviously it would just be feeding into the electron transport chain via Krebs. But ultimately, to break down that, you need a lot of oxygen. Okay, so there's a lot of high energy bonds in there. So that's why fat's really good for storage for energy. But it's not anywhere near as efficient to break down, so that's why we don't usually use it. But yeah, 51 oxygen's required and only 36 CO2's made. So 36 over 51 gives you a respiratory quotient below 1. Again, they wouldn't expect you to know anything about that, but I suppose they could give you this information and expect you to work with it. You can also see down here in the table RQ values, so this ratio of CO2 to oxygen. You can see glucose, as I mentioned, is 1. Fatty acids, as I mentioned, 0.7, and it's
in that ballpark, protein's 0.9. Now, if it was anaerobic respiration, again, you'd have to use a respirometer to measure the amount of CO2 taken up by the organism and the volume of oxygen and that type of thing. But you'd actually find that you had a respiratory quotient above 1. Okay, so anaerobic respiration, 1.6, 1.7. Okay, so just be aware, basically, that we know the difference between aerobic and anaerobic, but that we can also aerobically respire fats and proteins if we need to. But obviously they're nowhere near as efficient as glucose, and hence why we do use glucose as our primary respiratory substrate.